Welcome back to chapter 5. Ivy shrieked, "Seb, go!" She slung Grandma Sylvie's bag across her back before kicking away from the ground. Up ahead, Seb's wheels squealed as he shot onto the tarmac and skidded round the corner. Ivy flashed a look over her shoulder, pedalling frantically. Officer Smokeheart was in Grandma Sylvie's porch, holding the conch shell to his lips. The constable was already aboard the black coach. Rising up off the saddle, Ivy pushed down on the pedals as hard as she could. What sounded like a hailstorm started up behind her, drawing closer. The horses. The coach was on the road. "Stay close to me," Seb shouted. "This way!" He turned off the road, darting through a small gap in the hedgerow and headed into a field. "They're too big to come after us," he yelled. "They'll have to go the long way round." Ivy could see what he was planning. Ahead of them, the road curved round the edge of the field. Seb was cycling straight across the grass towards the open gate. On the opposite side, if they were lucky, they'd get there before the coach. Ivy hurtled after him. Her bike squeaked and groaned over the bumpy ground. Glancing back, she could see the top of the coach over the hedgerow. It was gaining on them now. The constable was craning forward, flicking a whip through the air, while the horses' head feathers tossed around madly. "They're catching up," Ivy warned. She didn't know how much longer she and Seb could stay in front. "Go faster!" he yelled at her, his cheeks bright red. His legs were a blur. "We have to make it!" Ivy surged forward into the battering rain. Seb was only metres away from the gate. "Ivy!" he shouted, crossing the road. She looked back at the coach, which was nearly upon them. She caught a glimpse of the dark-haired boy inside, pushing against the glass, steadying himself against the jolts. Smokeheart's voice filled the air again. "Stop where you are!" Ivy faltered as she reached the road. The horses were metres away. She stared helplessly at Seb. His eyes were wide. She screamed his name, and then the carriage was between them. A splintering, creaking noise split the air. The constable howled. Ivy was thrown headfirst off her bike. Her helmet took the worst of the impact as she thudded into the hard earth out beside the road. Grandma Sylvie's bag crunched painfully against her ribs and cold mud splashed onto her cheeks. When she opened her eyes, she saw a face. Angled cheekbones, dark chocolate eyes, skin like polished teak. It was the boy from the coach. "Are you all right?" he asked her. The rain had soaked his long, straggly hair and was running down onto his shoulders. Ivy murmured. Her brain felt like it had been made of marshmallow. She struggled with the strap of her helmet and eventually tugged it off. "What happened?" "Underguards," the boy grunted. "Must have been too interested in chasing you to notice the ice on the road." Ivy raised a shaky hand to her temple. "Underguards?" "They've overturned in the next field," the boy continued. "Looks like your friend saw it just in time." "Friend?" The fog in Ivy's head started to clear. Her neck prickled as she remembered. "Seb!" Clearly, she lifted herself up. Carefully, she lifted herself up. Her bike was lying some 5 metres away, the wheels trilling as they spun. A familiar figure was staggering across the field. "Ivy!" Seb called out breathlessly. "Are you okay?" She tried to get to her feet. The boy helped her up. His skinny figure, slim-fitting jeans, black leather jacket and red high-top baseball shoes reminded her of the lead singer of the Rips. "Easy," he said. "You're gonna feel like you've had a sack of flour dumped on your head. But just try to breathe. Everything moving?" Slowly and systematically, she wiggled her fingers and toes and tilted her head from side to side. She suspected there was probably a few cuts and grazes hiding beneath her coat, but she wouldn't need an ambulance. I think so. Seb. She focused on him as he approached. He fixed his gaze on the stranger in front of him. Who are you? Seb asked. Now that they were both next to each other, Ivy could see they were probably of a similar age. Are you one of them? The boy arched his eyebrow. One of the Uggs? Hell no. I'd rather be a ghoul. His eyes went nervously to a spot by Ivy's feet. I've had my fair share of running from them, though. If you two want to get away, you don't have much time. Ivy glanced down, wondering what it was he was looking at. Standing in the grass by her feet was a small leather suitcase with brass latches. A brown paper tag was tied around the handle. Strange. Ivy hadn't glimpsed it in the field earlier. She bent over and gripped the handle. How does this get? The question caught in her mouth as a wave of tingly heat spread through her fingers. She gave a short gasp. The suitcase felt so much like a hot potato she struggled not to drop it. She'd had this sensation before when she held the silver coin. The only difference was that touching the suitcase felt much more intense. The boy stiffened and threw a gloved hand towards the case. That's mine. Ivy held it out to him. All right, just then she heard a rattle of a harness in the road. The underguards, the boy hissed. There's no time. He snatched the suitcase, unfastened the latches, opened it on the grass and dropped onto his knees beside it. Are you coming? Ivy's head was spinning. Going where? Seb dug his fingers into her shoulder. Ivy, we need to do something now. Too late. The rapid fire of hoofbeats sounded on the other side of the hedgerow. A wild neigh followed the clatter of something loud and heavy, and then Officer Smokeheart came tearing towards them. He moved impossibly fast, his arms pumping as the black cloak mushroomed up behind him. Ivy noticed with the jolt of his face and neck they were no longer smooth and pale. They were covered with tiny scarlet dots, like drops of blood. In his outstretched hand he waved his toilet brush, the bristles alive with blue sparks. Go, now! The boy yanked on Ivy's arm, hauling her to the ground. She felt wet grass under her hands as something pushed on the back of her head. She saw the brown suede lining of the suitcase expanding before a cold feeling slipped down her spine, and she was swallowed by darkness. Join me next time, boys and girls, for Chapter 6.